One of our reliable sources told us that there's this ancient, mysterious tunnel running 40 feet underground the old city of Jerusalem.
Beneath the stones of Jerusalem's holiest ground, something has been hidden for 3,000 years. Wars have been fought above it, and generations have guarded it with faith and blood. Yet its secret remained untouched. Now, artificial intelligence has cut through the silence of that bedrock, exposing what human hands and eyes could never reach. What it uncovered is not just history. It is a revelation so profound it threatens to upend everything we thought we knew about our past and our future. The Mountain of God, a nexus of faith and conflict. For Jewish people, this is the holiest ground. It is the place where they believe the world was created. Here, the first temple, built by King Solomon, once stood, housing the sacred Ark of the Covenant. It was destroyed, and then a second temple was built in its place, a center of worship, until it, too, was razed by an empire. But the longing never died. The Western Wall is a remnant of that second temple, a place of mourning and hope. The deepest part of the ancient temple, a room called the Holy of Holies, was where God's presence was believed to dwell. So sacred is this spot that many devout Jews will not even walk on the mount itself for fear of trespassing on holy ground. For Muslims, this place is known as the Noble Sanctuary, or Haram al-Sharif. It is the third holiest site in Islam. They believe it was from this very rock, now enclosed by the Golden Dome, that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven on his night journey. The magnificent Al-Aqsa Mosque, with its silver dome, stands at the southern end, a place of prayer for generations. This entire platform is a sanctuary of profound peace and devotion for the Islamic world. And for Christians, this ground is sacred because Jesus himself walked here. He taught in the temple courts and challenged the money changers, his life and ministry intertwined with this place. So, one piece of land, barely larger than a few football fields, holds the deepest truths of three great faiths. It is a mountain where heaven and earth are said to touch. But this incredible importance comes with a heavy price. It is the most disputed piece of territory on the planet. Because it is so sacred, it is also incredibly fragile. The very idea of taking a shovel to this ground, of digging into it as an archaeologist would anywhere else, is unthinkable. It would be seen as a violation, a desecration. The political tension is so high that any attempt could spark a serious conflict. This has created a unique and frustrating mystery. While we have explored the pyramids of Egypt and the tombs of ancient kings, the very heart of Jerusalem, the ground that holds answers to 1,000 historical and religious questions, remains completely untouched by modern science. It is the ultimate blank spot on the map of human history. We have stories, we have faith, but we've had no physical proof from the most critical area itself. What lies beneath the stones of this sacred plateau? For decades, it was a question no scientist could answer without risking global controversy. But now, a new technology has found a way to see the unseeable: shadows and whispers. For as long as people have known the Temple Mount's significance, they have dreamed of uncovering its secrets. But this isn't a story of straightforward discovery. It's a story of working around the edges, of peeking through keyholes, and of finding clues in the trash. It's a history of frustration. The first major attempt came in the 19th century with a British officer named Charles Warren. He couldn't dig on the mount itself, so he did the next best thing. He went under it. Warren and his team spent years mapping dark, treacherous tunnels and ancient water shafts that snaked beneath the city's foundations. By the flickering light of oil lamps, they discovered immense stone chambers and mysterious voids, their sketches revealing a hidden, subterranean world. Warren's work proved there was a vast, unknown complexity lying just out of reach. and it set imaginations racing. If this was what was around the mount, what unimaginable treasures lay directly beneath it? The dream of getting closer continued into the 20th century. After 1967, archaeologists were able to excavate right up against the massive retaining walls that hold the Temple Mount platform in place. What they found was breathtaking. They uncovered the original street level from the time of Jesus, where pilgrims would have walked. They found giant stones from King Herod's expansion of the temple, and the base of Robinson's Arch, which once supported a monumental staircase leading up to the sacred precinct. These digs painted a vivid picture of the grandeur that surrounded the temple, but they were still just studying the frame. The painting itself, the temple complex at the center, remained hidden behind a veil of stone and sanctity. Then, in the late 1990s, something shocking happened. The Islamic authorities managing the mount conducted unauthorized construction, and truckloads of earth, soil rich with 3,000 years of history, were dug up and dumped as garbage in a nearby valley. To archaeologists, it was a catastrophe. This was like tearing pages out of the world's most important history book before anyone could read them. But from this disaster, a remarkable project was born: the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Archaeologists and volunteers decided to sift through every single bucket of this discarded earth. It was a painstaking process, like looking for needles in a mountain-sized haystack. But slowly, the mountain gave up its secrets. They found over 500,000 artifacts: coins from ancient kings, arrowheads from crusader battles, and jewelry from Islamic princes. But the most powerful finds were the smallest ones. A tiny clay seal, known as a bulla, was found with a name stamped on it: Gedaliah, son of Pashur. This very name appears in the book of Jeremiah as a royal official in the court of King Zedekiah, right before the first temple's destruction. They found pottery shards and ritual objects dating back to the time of Solomon. These weren't just old things. They were tangible connections to the stories of the Bible, proof that the royal and priestly classes described in Scripture were real people who walked this ground. Yet, for all their incredible work, the Sifting Project had a major limitation. The earth had been ripped from its context. The artifacts were like scattered words from a story that had been thrown into the air. They proved the story existed, but they couldn't put the sentences back in order. They couldn't tell us where the Holy of Holies was, or what the original temple looked like. They were clues found far from the scene of the crime. The heart of the mystery remained buried, protected by faith and fear. All the tunnels, excavations, and sifted earth had only built a stronger case for what might be at the center. But the center itself was still a complete blank, a silent question mark. Secrets beneath the mount. Between 2021 and 2024, a small team of fresh thinkers and careful researchers returned to the ground around the Temple Mount with a clear, curious aim: to look again at a place that had been measured, mapped, and whispered about for generations. They did not dig blindly for pottery shards or bones. Instead, they paired very old hand-drawn maps with new machines and a modern way of reading the past. The sketches they studied were brittle pages from the British Mandate era, drawings made by officers who had walked the Mount a century ago and recorded what they found. The team fed those drawings into computer models and then used artificial intelligence to find patterns the eye might miss. Their attention fell on the Mount's southern edge, the stretch near the western wall where stories of hidden chambers and secret stairways had long drifted through the city. These stories were not brand new. The Ottomans had heard them. British officials had noted them in their field notebooks. Travelers from older centuries had scribbled about dark corridors and rooms tucked under stone. Still, most of these tales had lived in the half-light between rumor and fact, the sort of story that is mentioned at dinner, then forgotten with the next full plate. Because the Mount itself is off-limits for heavy digging, the team used tools instead of picks. Ground-penetrating radar, a technology that had helped reveal passages beneath pyramids, was swept across courtyards and passageways near the wall. At first, the radar images were messy and unclear, like shapes seen through fog. But when AI was used to analyze the data, lines and right angles began to appear. The straight edges of walls, the corners of rooms, the shadowy trace of steps. Those were not random patterns carved by wind or water. They bore the regular order of human design. To test what the scanners showed, the researchers layered the new images over the old British drawings. Where the officers' maps hinted at blocked staircases and hidden corridors, the radar picked up voids. Where the maps marked pathways, the scans suggested long, narrow spaces below the surface. The match was striking. When a hand-drawn plan and a machine-made picture agreed across decades, the idea of coincidence grew thin. The team felt increasing confidence that something real lay below. Because digging directly under the mount remained forbidden, permission was sought and granted to work in the nearby passageways of the western wall. There, with slow, careful removals of rubble and fallen stone, laborers uncovered a staircase cut cleanly into limestone. The steps led down away from sunlight into still air. The silence at the bottom waited. The quiet that arrives where people have not spoken for centuries. The first chamber they opened was small and weathered, a room that still whispered of prayer and presence. Crosses, faint and worn, marked the upper walls. Little niches, once likely used to hold lamps, icons, or small offerings, had been hollowed into the stone, now empty and softened by time. Scratched letters and thin lines hinted at inscriptions that had faded but not vanished. The room gave every sign of once being a Christian sanctuary, probably from the Byzantine era, roughly in the 4th or 5th century, when the city's life had a different shape and voice. Yet, the most striking revelation lay beneath that worn floor. A short descent revealed another foundation, one older and built in a different manner. Here, massive ashlar blocks were fitted with expert care, so close that nearly no mortar or gap remained between them. The style of construction echoed ancient building techniques seen in some of the oldest known gates and platforms in the region. Tests suggested this lower layer was of great age, predating well-known later rebuilds by centuries. Suddenly, the small Byzantine chapel was not the whole story. It sat like a patch sewn onto a much older cloth. The deeper stones hinted at an earlier phase of building, one that might have served a different, more ancient purpose. The way this foundation lined up with routes and references in older texts suggested it may once have belonged to a place of ritual or special importance. The blueprint emerges. Weeks of careful scanning and data processing turned into months. The team watched as the AI, like a master artist restoring a faded painting, slowly brought the hidden world beneath the Temple Mount into focus. What emerged on their screens was not just a few isolated chambers. It was a labyrinth, a secret city of stone hidden in the dark. The AI generated a three-dimensional map, a ghostly blue model that they could rotate and explore on their computers. It revealed a sprawling, multi-level complex carved directly into the bedrock. This wasn't a haphazard collection of caves. They could see corridors snaking into the darkness, staircases descending to deeper, more mysterious levels, and large, rectangular chambers arranged with a precision that hinted at a sacred purpose. One chamber in particular, located not directly under the dome of the rock, but offset towards the southern end of the platform, captured their attention. It was larger than the others, and its dimensions were strikingly specific. To the archaeologists, they echoed the proportions of the Holy of Holies, as described in the Book of Kings. The most startling revelation, however, was the water system. Previous scholars had known about some cisterns under the mount, but the AI map revealed something far more advanced. It showed a meticulously engineered network of channels, reservoirs, and aqueducts that functioned as a single integrated system. The AI analyzed the flow patterns and revealed features that seemed impossibly sophisticated for their suspected age. There were narrow, carved channels designed to control the speed of water, preventing erosion. There were settling basins where dirt and debris would naturally sink, allowing cleaner water to flow into the main cisterns. This discovery brought biblical passages to life in a new way. The first book of Kings describes how King Solomon built the temple, but the book of Chronicles details the work of a later king, Hezekiah, who made the pool and the conduit and brought water into the city. Scholars have long debated the exact nature of these hydrological projects. The map suggested that the system began much earlier, with Solomon's engineers laying a foundation that was expanded over centuries. The scale of it suggested a massive need for water, not just for drinking, but for the ritual purifications and sacrifices central to temple worship. The AI even highlighted a specific large cistern that aligned with historical descriptions of the Great Sea, a giant bronze basin said to stand in the temple courtyard, used by priests for cleansing. This underground network was the hidden lifeblood that made the temple's sacred functions possible. But when was it built? This was the most critical question. The AI was put to work on dating the structures. It compared the precise angles of the chambers, the methods of rock cutting, and the overall layout to a vast database of known archaeological sites. It flagged the use of distinctively dressed ashlar blocks, stones chiseled with fine, smooth margins, a signature style of the First Temple period seen in other sites like Megiddo. Cross-referencing this with the mountain of historical data pointed consistently to one era: the Iron Age, the time of the United Kingdom of Judah and Israel, the period associated with King Solomon in the 10th century BC. The architectural signatures matched other, lesser structures from that time, but on a scale and with unprecedented complexity. The preliminary analysis was clear. The deepest, most foundational layers of this subterranean complex were not Roman, not Herodian, but far older. The implication of this was staggering. It meant that the Temple Mount was not simply a flat platform built to hold a temple. The temple itself was built atop a massive hidden foundation, a secret, sacred basement that had been lost to time. The descriptions in the Bible of the temple's grandeur suddenly felt less like metaphor and more like reportage. The stone door. The machines moved with care beneath the Temple Mount's southern edge, slipping past hidden water channels and rounding the sealed priestly rooms. For weeks, the team followed the path the instruments drew, inching forward in slow, steady steps. Then, one day, the ground revealed something the sensors had not fully prepared them for: a heavy stone door, closed and oddly untouched. It looked ancient and strong, with clean faces and sharp edges that made it stand out from the rough rock around it. The air near it felt different, as though the stones were holding an old secret. Each morning, the workers returned, brushing away dust and rubble with steady hands, writing down every small detail. At last, a passage opened. Beyond the stone barrier lay a compact chamber no wider than 10 feet across. The walls were not built of separate blocks, but cut straight from living rock, their surfaces smooth and undecorated. The room held a strange hush, the kind that arrives in places people have not walked for a very long time. At first, the space seemed empty. Then, eyes fixed on a single object at the center. A shallow stone basin sat half-buried in gray ash. Around it lay broken clay lamp fragments, the crumbled ends of oil containers, and tiny wreaths of charred incense. Small offerings, bits of pottery, a few worn beads, were scattered near the basin, as if left by hands that once made quiet prayers here. The chamber seemed almost sealed against time. Though other ruins had fallen apart above ground, this small room had been kept safe and still. The basin itself wore the marks of age, but it carried something more than mere wear. When the team swept the surface with their lights and scanners, faint grooves began to show. At first, they looked like scratches, then like careful lines placed by a single hand. Slowly, the shapes resolved into letters. The script was Paleo-Hebrew, an old form of writing used many centuries ago. Time had softened the strokes, but the meaning did not vanish. The carved sentence spoke of an enduring presence, a spirit bound to this place. The words hung in the air like a vow. Those words echoed descriptions from ancient books about the most sacred corner of the temple, the place known in old texts as the Holy of Holies. That inner room had long been described as the very seat of the divine presence, a space so sacred that only the high priest could enter, and only after long rituals and on a single day each year. For generations, scholars had argued over whether the exact location of that chamber could ever be found. Now, in this tiny stone room, evidence had quietly begun to answer the question. Archaeologists and experts moved through their tasks with a calm but urgent focus. The broken lamp pieces matched known forms from the 8th and 7th centuries BCE. The basin was carved from the same type of limestone used in structures dated to the era of Solomon, with the same careful surface work and block size. The carved phrase matched language patterns seen in religious texts and inscriptions newly discovered in the region. Each line of evidence, object type, stone, shape, and script, fit together like pieces of a long-lost puzzle. This find was more than an old bowl in a dark room. It was a clear, datable link between written accounts and the hidden ground beneath the mount. It offered a tangible point of contact with rituals and customs that had shaped large parts of ancient life. The chamber, its vessel, the lamp fragments, and the inscription all pointed to a place once thought of as the zone where heaven and earth met. The discovery did not hand down neat, final answers. Instead, it changed the terms of the conversation. Where once there had been only texts and theories, there was now a carefully documented spot that could be studied with scientific methods. The objects could be dated, the stone tested, and the inscription compared to other known writings. For believers, the tiny room offered a new way to look at old stories, not just as words in a book, but as traces left in stone and ash, waiting patiently for someone to listen. The classified chamber. The Temple Mount sits at the crossroads of devotion for billions, Jews, Muslims, and Christians. It is threaded through the life and teachings of Jesus. Any archaeological claim that seemed to confirm one faith's narrative risked inflaming centuries of tension, so authorities moved with deliberate caution. Official statements were measured, reports remained limited, photographs were classified, and the chamber's meaning was guarded like a state secret. Silence did not last forever. Some theologians hailed the discovery as validation of prophecy, a reminder that the temple had once connected heaven and earth. Others, especially within Orthodox communities, felt deep unease. Their law teaches that the Holy of Holies is so sacred that approaching it without ritual purification could be a transgression. The idea that researchers had entered that space, intentionally or not, struck many as a violation. Historians began re-examining ancient texts with fresh eyes. Passages long dismissed as poetic flourishes started to read like eyewitness notes. References to sacred basins, inscriptions promising permanence, and rites of purification now matched to physical objects. What had once been legend took on the contours of description. Behind closed doors, International institutions took notice, and quiet funding followed. Teams invested in non-invasive techniques, among them muon imaging, used to detect hidden voids in other ancient monuments, to map chambers without disturbance. Insiders leaked hints that the imaging detected more voids and structures than expected. If true, the Temple Mount shifted from a symbol to the scene of a major archaeological mystery. Yet as findings accumulated, so did the silence. With every inscription, basin, and stone that seemed to align with Scripture, the line between faith and science blurred. The past refused to remain a story. It kept insisting on being fact. The world, unready for that collision, pulled back. When faith and archaeology met in that sealed chamber, the ripple reached far beyond academia. Some Christian preachers began referencing the discovery in sermons, interpreting it as confirmation of ancient promises and a sign of spiritual renewal. Jewish reactions were conflicted: validation on one hand, and profound distress over the possibility of human intrusion into the holiest space on the other. For Muslims, any suggestion that one tradition's claim outweighed another's was politically combustible and liable to inflame existing tensions. The Dome of the Rock still gleams, and Al-Aqsa still calls the faithful. Governments understood the danger and chose silence over spectacle. No formal announcement was made. Instead, the world received whispers, fragments of leaked reports, cautious briefings, and the muted statements of those who know too much, but speak too little. Beneath Jerusalem's stones, a mystery holds its secrets for now, an unsettling reminder of how tightly belief and evidence can bind, and how fragile that balance remains. Still, scholars continue to probe with new tools and quiet diplomacy, hoping that if the full story emerges, it will be handled with care. Until then, the Mount keeps its riddles, watched by prayer and patience. An earthquake in archaeology and faith. The discovery did not leak out with a bang, but with a whisper. A quiet academic paper, a hushed conversation at a conference, a carefully worded news report. But in the worlds of archaeology and religion, it landed like an earthquake. The AI's digital blueprint of a sprawling complex beneath the Temple Mount did not bring clarity. It ignited a firestorm of debate, belief, and fear. Within scholarly circles, the reaction was deeply divided. Some archaeologists hailed it as the breakthrough of the century, a revolutionary application of technology that had finally pierced the greatest veil in history. They argued the data was overwhelming. The precise geometry, the alignment with known Iron Age construction, the sophisticated water system. To them, this was the first real, tangible evidence of the scale and sophistication of the First Temple. But others reacted with fury and skepticism. They accused the team of sensationalism, of letting a computer algorithm, a black box whose reasoning wasn't fully transparent, make wild interpretations. It's seeing patterns in the noise, one critic said. It's a Rorschach test for biblical archaeologists. They wanted to find a temple, so the AI found them one. The debate raged. Was this cold, hard science, or was it faith dressed up in high-tech clothing? The religious reactions were even more powerful. Among Jewish communities, the news sparked a profound and complex response. For some, it was a moment of messianic excitement. They saw it as a validation of ancient texts, a sign that the temple's legacy was real and that its future restoration was moving closer. But for many ultra-Orthodox leaders, it was a cause for condemnation. They believed the AI's digital intrusion was a violation of sacred ground as serious as a physical dig. To them, probing the divine presence, the Shekinah, with radar and algorithms, was a dangerous act of hubris. Islamic authorities, the custodians of the Haram al-Sharif, issued firm and swift rejections. They dismissed the findings entirely, stating that the noble sanctuary is an Islamic holy site and that such theories were politically motivated attempts to undermine their heritage. They reasserted their long-standing position. There is no evidence of a Jewish temple beneath the mosque complex, and such claims are used to fuel conflict rather than pursue truth. Christian scholars watched with keen interest, seeing potential corroboration for the historical context of the Bible. For them, it was less about the temple's religious significance and more about its historical reality. If the AI map was accurate, it provided a stunning backdrop to the world of Jesus and the New Testament. Inevitably, the discovery spilled over into politics. World governments and international bodies, aware of the site's volatility, issued statements urging extreme caution. The digital map instantly became a geopolitical tool. Some groups used it to bolster territorial claims. The fear was palpable. A single piece of data, a digital ghost, now had the power to inflame passions and destabilize an entire region. This led to the most difficult question of all, the ethical one. The team had set out to answer a historical mystery, but now they faced a moral dilemma far bigger than archaeology. Should they, or anyone, ever try to physically verify the find? They had achieved something incredible. They had looked without touching. But was that enough? Or was the pull of absolute proof too strong? They had wanted knowledge, but they had not considered the weight of it. In their quest for answers, they had opened Pandora's box with a digital key, and now there was no closing it. The genie was out of the bottle, and the world was left to grapple with the consequences.